The corridors of Windsor Castle had never felt quieter. It was late afternoon, the kind of great English light that slips through the tall windows and settles like dust on the polished floors. Most of the household had withdrawn. The king was in meetings. Kate was resting. And in the quieter wing of the private apartments, two small princes and one very curious little boy were supposed to be finishing their tea. Prince Louis was not finishing his tea. He had already abandoned the plate of biscuits, slipped off his chair, and wandered toward the tall oak doors that led into the Queen Consort's private dressing suite. The doors were usually locked. Today, one of them stood slightly ajar. Louis paused. His bright eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. A soft, unfamiliar shape sat just inside the threshold, a dark leather bag, half hidden beneath a folded cashmere throw. It did not belong there. Louis knew every corner of these rooms a way only a child who had grown up under the watchful eyes of nannies and protection officers could. This bag was new, and it was deliberately out of sight. He crouched, small fingers reaching toward the handle. That was the moment Prince William appeared at the far end of the corridor. Louis. The single word carried the quiet authority that only a father and future king can produce. Louis froze, hand still hovering. William walked closer, his expression unreadable, but his eyes already scanning the open door and the bag beyond it. "What have you found?" Louis pointed without speaking. William stepped past him, crouched, and carefully drew the bag into the light. The leather was soft, expensive, and marked with a small embroidered crest that did not belong to any member of the immediate family. Inside, nestled in tissue paper that still held the faint scent of old cedar and lavender, lay a folded length of deep purple velvet edged in gold thread. William's breath caught. He knew that fabric. Every senior member of the household knew it. It was a fragment of the late Queen Elizabeth's formal state robe, the one she had worn for the state opening of Parliament in her final decade, the one that had been carefully catalogued, conserved, and placed under the care of the royal collection after her passing. It was not supposed to be here. It was not supposed to be anywhere near Camilla's private wardrobe. William straightened slowly. His voice, when it came, was low and controlled. "Stay here, Louis. Do not move." He walked to the double doors of the dressing suite and pushed them fully open. The room beyond was elegant, softly lit, lined with tall wardrobes of dark wood. One of them, the tallest, nearest the window, had its handle wrapped in a thin silk cord, the kind used when something was meant to remain undisturbed. William did not hesitate. He pulled the cord free and forced the doors open. Inside, hanging among Camilla's evening gowns and tailor coats, was a second, larger garment bag. The zipper was only partially closed. A flash of that same purple velvet and gold embroidery was visible through the gap. William's jaw tightened. He reached in and carefully withdrew the full robe. The weight of it settled in his arms like history itself. The lining still carried the faint imprint of decades of careful storage. A small conservation tag, yellowed at the edges, remained pinned near the collar, the same tag that had been recorded in the official inventory only months earlier. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. Camilla stood in the doorway. For a moment neither of them spoke. The air between them felt heavier than the robe in William's hands. "William," she said at last, her voice carefully measured, "that was not meant to be found today." "It was not meant to be here at all," he answered. Louis, still watching from the corridor, took a tiny step closer. His father's tone had changed. It was a voice he used when something important had been broken and could not easily be put back together. William turned the robe in his hands, examining the seams, the lining, the delicate gold thread that had once caught the light of Westminster. Then he looked back at Camilla. "Explain this. Now." Camilla's expression did not crack, but something behind her eyes shifted. She stepped fully into the room and closed the doors behind her, shutting Louis out of the conversation but not out of earshot. The little prince pressed his ear to the wood, heart beating fast. "It was never intended as theft," Camilla said quietly. "The robe was due for conservation work. The schedule changed. Certain pieces were temporarily relocated while the main storage rooms underwent climate adjustments. This wing was considered secure." "Secure," William repeated, the word sharp. "You placed my grandmother's state robe inside your personal wardrobe without informing the collection, without informing the king, and without informing me." Louis found a second bag hidden under a throw. "That is not relocation. That is concealment." Camilla's hands folded in front of her. There are reasons that go beyond simple storage, William. Reasons that concern the dignity of the crown and the timing of certain public appearances. I believe it was better handled quietly. William's grip on the robe tightened. Dignity is not served by secrecy. My grandmother wore this robe when the country needed to see continuity. It is not a prop. It is not a private possession. And it is certainly not something to be kept behind locked doors in this suite. Outside the door, Louis's eyes were wide. He had heard enough arguments in these corridors to know when something truly serious was unfolding. He slipped away from the door and ran, small feet silent on the thick carpet, toward the private sitting room where his mother usually rested in the late afternoon. Kate looked up as he burst in, slightly out of breath. "Mama, Papa is angry." He opened the big wardrobe. "There is a purple dress. Grandma's dress." Kate's expression changed instantly. She set aside the papers on her lap, rose, and took Louis's hand. "Show me." They returned to the corridor just as the doors to the dressing suite opened again. William stepped out, the robe carefully folded over his arm, Camilla following a pace behind. The atmosphere was brittle. Kate's gaze moved from the velvet in her husband's arms, Camilla's carefully composed face, then back again. She did not need a full explanation. The look in William's eyes told her enough. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked quietly. William nodded once. "It is." Kate turned to Louis and gently guided him a few steps away. "Go and find your brother. Stay in the playroom until I come for you." Louis hesitated, looking back at the adults, then obeyed. As soon as he was out of earshot, Kate faced the two of them. "How long has it been here?" Camilla answered first. "Less than a fortnight. The conservation team was delayed. I made a judgment call." "A judgment call that required hiding a second bag under throw where a child could find it," William said. His voice remained level, but the edge was unmistakable. "We are going to the collection offices this evening. The robe returns to official custody tonight. And then we are going to discuss, with the king present if necessary, how this happened and why no one was informed." Camilla drew a slow breath. "There are sensitivities, William. Public perception. Timing. Certain decisions about which pieces are displayed and when. I was trying to protect the family's position." "Protecting the family," William replied, "begins with honesty inside it." He adjusted the robe in his arms, the gold thread catching the last of the afternoon light. For a moment the three of them stood in silence, the future king, the queen consort, and the Princess of Wales, while the weight of the late queen's presence seemed to fill the corridor once more. Kate spoke softly. "Louis saw the bag first. That means the staff will hear about it soon enough. We cannot pretend this stayed private." William nodded. "Then we deal with it properly. No more closed doors." He turned and began walking toward the private staircase that led down to the offices of the royal collection. Camilla followed after a brief pause. Kate remained a moment longer, her eyes resting on the empty wardrobe doors still standing open, before she closed them gently and went to find her sons. In the playroom, Louis sat on the window seat, swinging his legs. George looked up from a book. "What happened?" Louis considered the question with a seriousness only a 5-year-old can manage. "Papa found Grandma's special dress. It was hiding. He made them open the wardrobe. And then everyone looked very serious." George closed the book. "Is Mama cross?" "I think everyone is a little bit cross," Louis said. "But the dress is safe now." Outside, the light continued to fade over the castle grounds. Inside, the late queen's robe was already on its way back to the secure rooms where it belonged, rescued, for the moment, from a wardrobe it should never have entered. Yet the questions it left behind would not be so easily folded away. William walked in silence, the velvet heavy against his arm, already calculating the conversations that would follow, with the king, with the conservation team, with the household staff who had somehow allowed a state robe to vanish into private quarters. Camilla walked beside him, her expression unreadable, but the set of her shoulders suggested she understood the gravity of what had just been uncovered. And somewhere behind them, in the quiet of the upper corridor, a small boy who had simply followed his curiosity had set an entire chain of events in motion, a chain that would force open more than one closed door before the night was over. The robe had been found. The truth, however, was only beginning to unfold. The evening light had almost vanished by the time William reached the secure offices of the royal collection beneath the castle. The heavy velvet robe still rested across his arm, its gold thread catching every passing lamp as though the late queen herself refused to be ignored. Camilla walked a measured pace behind him. Neither spoke until the reinforced door closed and the conservation officer on duty, a quiet woman named Eleanor who had served the household for 20 years, looked up from her desk and froze. "Your Royal Highness, that is—" "Yes," William said. "It is. I need a full inventory check against the last recorded location of this robe. Immediately." Eleanor rose, pale but professional. She took the garment with gloved hands and laid it across the examination table under soft museum lighting. Within minutes, the digital logs confirmed what William already knew. The robe had been signed out for temporary climate-controlled storage 12 days earlier. The authorization bore a senior household code linked to the Queen Consort's private office. No further destination had been entered. William read the entry twice. Camilla stood a few feet away, hands folded, waiting. "You authorized a removal," he said. "I did. And then you brought it into your own suite and concealed a second bag containing a detached panel." Camilla met his eyes. The panel had come loose during earlier handling. "I did not want it mislaid while the main body of the robe waited for the delayed conservation team. The bag under the throw was temporary. Louis simply found it first." William's voice remained low, but the temperature in the room dropped. A temporary solution does not involve locking a state robe inside a personal wardrobe and wrapping the handle with silk cord so that no one would open it. That is not care. That is concealment. Eleanor cleared her throat carefully. "Your Royal Highness, the climate readings in the private suite are not within the approved range for textile of this age. The humidity has been fluctuating. Another week and we might have seen irreversible damage to the velvet pile." William closed his eyes for a single second. When he opened them again, the decision was already made. "Return the robe to proper storage tonight. Full condition report by morning. And notify the king that I will speak with him before breakfast." Camilla's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "William, there are layers to this that you have not yet seen. Certain public schedules were under discussion. The timing of any display of Her late Majesty's robes carries weight. I was attempting to keep options open without creating noise." "Noise," William repeated. "My 5-year-old son found a hidden bag containing a piece of his great-grandmother's state robe. That is the noise we now have, and it will not be managed by further secrecy." He turned and left the room. Camilla remained a moment longer, watching Eleanor begin the careful packing process, then followed. Upstairs, Kate had already settled the boys. George was reading again. Charlotte was drawing. Louis sat on the edge of his bed, still too alert for sleep. When William entered the nursery corridor, Kate met him halfway. "He's waiting for you," she said softly. "He won't settle until he knows the purple dress is safe." William stepped into Louis's room. The little boy looked up, eyes serious beyond his years. "Is Grandma's dress going home now?" William sat on the edge of the bed. "Yes, it's going back where it belongs. You did something important today, Louis. You noticed what others had missed." Louis considered this. "Was Aunt Camilla cross with me?" "No." She was surprised. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that look different when a child sees them clearly. "You helped us put things right." Louis nodded, satisfied enough to lean against his father's side. William stayed until the boy's breathing slowed into sleep. Only then did he rise and walk with Kate into the private sitting room. "Charles will want a full account," Kate said. "He will have one. And he will hear that the collection was bypassed, the climate controls ignored, and a conservation tag still attached to a garment that should never have left secure storage." William rubbed a hand across his face. "I forced those wardrobe doors open in front of our son. That image will stay with him. I needed him to see that some things are not negotiable, not even inside this family." Kate's hand found his. "You did the right thing. The robe is safe. The rest can be handled with less drama." But drama, it seemed, had already begun its own quiet journey through the household. By the time the castle clock struck 10, soft conversations were moving along the staff corridors. A footman who had seen the open wardrobe doors earlier spoke to a housekeeper. The housekeeper mentioned the unusual movement of a garment bag to a senior dresser. Within an hour, the outline of the story, a hidden bag, a false wardrobe, the late Queen's robe, had taken on the shape of something that could not be fully contained. William and Kate were still discussing the morning's meeting with the king when a soft knock came at the door. It was the king's private secretary, polite and discreet. His Majesty asks if you would join him for a few minutes. Say, he has been informed. William exchanged a glance with Kate and rose. In the king's private study, the fire burned low. Charles sat in his usual chair, a folder open on the small table beside him. He looked tired, but the eyes that lifted to meet his son's were sharp. I have the conservation report already, the king said. Eleanor is efficient. The robe itself is unharmed, though the humidity risk was real. Sit down, William. William Saturday. For a long moment neither spoke. I forced the doors, William said at last. Louis found the first bag. I would not leave the second one locked away once I understood what it was. Charles nodded slowly. I would have done the same. Your grandmother's robes are not private property. They belong to the institution, to the history we are charged of protecting. Camilla has explained her reasoning to me. She believed she was buying time while schedules were adjusted. She was wrong to handle it this way. She placed it in her own wardrobe. Yes, and that decision ends tonight. The collection will issue a revised protocol in the morning. No state textile leaves secure storage without dual authorization and a recorded destination. That includes temporary moves. The king closed the folder. I will speak with Camilla further. You have my full support in what you did. William exhaled. Louis saw everything. He understands more than we sometimes give him credit for. A faint smile touched the king's face. Your grandmother always said the youngest often see the clearest. She would have been proud that he noticed. When William returned to the private apartment, the corridors were quieter. Kate was waiting. The boys were asleep. Outside, the last of the evening had settled into full dark. Yet the story did not end with the robe's safe return. In the days that followed, the household adjusted. New protocols were issued. Staff briefings were held. Camilla maintained a composed public schedule, but those who watched closely noticed a careful distance in certain private interactions. William made a point of walking the boys through the castle's public rooms more often, pausing at portraits of the late Queen, answering Louis's questions about the purple dress with quiet honesty. One afternoon, nearly a week later, Louis stopped in front of a display case that held smaller items from the late Queen's wardrobe, gloves, a sash, a single embroidered panel. He studied them for a long time. Papa, he said, will the big purple dress ever come out again? William crouched beside him. One day, when the time is right and everything is properly prepared. Not hidden, not rushed, when it can be shown with the respect it deserves. Louis nodded, as though that answer settled something important inside him. And somewhere in the secure storage rooms beneath the castle, the late Queen's state robe rested once more in the exact conditions it required. Temperature steady, humidity controlled, gold thread undisturbed. The hidden bag was gone. The wardrobe doors stood open only when they were meant to. The small boy who had first spotted what did not belong had returned to ordinary childhood adventures. But the memory of that afternoon remained. The moment a child saw what others had chosen not to see, and a father decided that some doors must be forced open, no matter who had closed them. The robe was safe. The truth, once found, could not be locked away again.